So this is a training session for VQ Manager for the Pre Reg trainees for both Swimit and also the Thames Valley area. The website that you need to go to in order to access the portfolio is www.vqmanager.co.uk. You will be sent via an email from one of the admin team a username and password to log into the VQ Manager. The link will be a temporary link, and when you click through, you'll be asked to change the password to something that you remember. So hopefully when you come back here the next time, you will remember your username and password. If for any reason you forget your username, you can use your email address in the top field and use the password that you can remember. If you've forgotten your password as well, you can use the links down at the bottom here. So forgotten your username will allow you to use your email address. Forgotten your password will send you a further link to access the portfolio. If you press the forgotten password link, the email is pretty much instantaneous, and the email, if you don't receive it, please go and check your junk items, because invariably, certainly on most NHS sites, the spam filter is very, very good. And that's exactly where you may find the email. The email will come from address which is called noreply@vqmanager.co.uk, and that will have the link on it. So once you are in the ePortfolio, you can see the ePortfolio looks like this. We call these tabs. So you've got 3 tabs at the top, and then you've got several tabs underneath. When you first log onto the ePortfolio, the home area will take you to the messaging tab, and if there's anything that you need to know about, it will be located in this area here. So we've got a message here letting us know that there was an enhancements done to the system last week. This message will actually disappear tomorrow. It's only on here for 7 days. But if you've read it and you don't need to see it anymore, you can click the box there, and then that will save and delete that particular message for you. So as a pre-reg trainee, the whole point in you having the portfolio is to upload your evidence. And in order to upload your evidence, you go to the tab which is called My Portfolio. And then you go to the first tab, which is called Log Evidence. If you hover over any of the tabs, a little yellow bubble will appear and will tell you what that particular tab is for. This is called the Log Evidence page, and this is the form that you need to complete every single time that you upload a piece of evidence. So in the Evidence Methods area, you must tick one of these, but actually if more than one is relevant, you can tick more than one. The Summary Evidence Description is the title, so what is the title of this particular piece of evidence? And then in the descriptive field, you can type up to 4,000 characters, which is about 2 sides of A4. You can type in there any kind of information in respect of the piece of evidence that you wish. Or you can type something like "See attached," because on this form here, there's a section a little bit lower down, upload and attach files in support of this evidence, which will allow you to upload pretty much any sort of file. You can upload as many files as you like to a single piece of evidence. The system will only process 8 files at a time. So when you choose a file, you choose it in exactly the same way that you do finding a file to upload to an email, for example. You find the file and then you hit the upload files. So the 8 file caveat just means that you can only choose 8 times before you hit the upload files area. I don't think you need to worry about the 100 megabytes at all, because that's normally in respect of video files that are uploaded. And from experience, I know that there are virtually no video files, if at all, that are uploaded for any of the courses that you do. It's mainly Word, PowerPoint, Excel, maybe photographs, maybe an audio that can be uploaded. So it's only really video files that will hit the 100 megabytes limit. Okay, so Once you've uploaded your evidence, you've explained what the descriptive is in respect of that particular piece of evidence. You've then got the evidence witness field. The evidence witness is if this piece of evidence needs to go via somebody else before it goes to your tutor. And the somebody else generally is the pharmacist or a colleague that you're working alongside. So if somebody else other than your tutor needs to verify the piece of work that you're uploading, you would then complete this area here with their name and their email address in this area here. If you're happy for this piece of work to go directly to the tutor because it doesn't need to go via the expert witness, then you don't need to fill in the evidence witness area here. You can just scroll down to the next section, which is called Criteria Met. And in the Criteria Met section, you'll notice that the performance standards are listed here. If we use the Open All, we can then see all of the performance standards listed. And when you upload a piece of evidence, what you're explaining to the evidence witness and then your tutor is that this piece of evidence, in your opinion, meets these particular performance standards. So you must tick these boxes to indicate to your tutor which of the performance standards that you believe have been met. I close that up. Then you have the next section down, which is called the comments section, which is your trainee comments to the educational supervisor. I think the tutor has renamed educational supervisor within your system. So this is an area here where you would write some comments about that particular piece of evidence, i.e. whether you found it difficult, you're not sure whether you did it right, what you might do differently next time, anything like that in the comments area. When you're completing any form in the ePortfolio, you must make sure that you hit either the Save button or one of the blue arrows down at the bottom of the page. If you leave this tab, go to another tab, and then return to this tab, if you haven't saved, anything that you've written on there will be lost. So it's really important to remember to either save or use one of the blue arrow options down at the bottom. So when you're uploading a piece of evidence, you've got three main options down at the bottom. You can either send it to the evidence witness. So if you've completed the section above, so it needs to go via your pharmacist or a colleague, then you select the first button. What that triggers is an email which will go to the evidence witness with a hyperlink on it. They'll click on the hyperlink, which will open up this piece of evidence. They can have a look at the evidence that you've uploaded. They've got a comments box where they can add their own comments, and they have two buttons down at the bottom. One says, I agree with this evidence, and one says, I disagree with this evidence. If they disagree with anything that you've written on there and hit the I disagree button, the piece of evidence will be returned to you for further work. And I would imagine that the evidence witness in their comments box would write some information about why they're rejecting that particular piece of work. You would then follow the same process again and then resubmit to evidence witness, and then they would get another link on another email which they would then follow through, and then again they get the choice of either agreeing or disagreeing with that piece of work. And it can go backwards and forwards between the evidence witness as many times as it needs to, but once it's complete, if the evidence witness selects I agree, then it moves on to the educational supervisor or tutor. If this piece of work doesn't need to go via your evidence witness, you can just use the second button, Submit to Educational Supervisor. That means that piece of work will go directly to them and not via anybody else. So if you're happy with this piece of work, you've added your comments, Submit to Educational Supervisor will go straight to them. They will get a notification to let them know that you've submitted this piece of work. If you're midway through this piece of work and you get called away, remember I said if you don't save anything on a tab, if you go back to that tab later on, you'll lose the information. You can use the Save and Continue Later option, which does exactly that. It just saves at whatever point you've reached in that piece of work, and you can come back to it later on. It's located on the To Do tab, which I'll show you very shortly. So once you've completed your piece of evidence, you've ticked off the performance standards, you've added your description, you've uploaded your document, you've ticked off the evidence methods. That piece of work will then be saved, will either be sent to the evidence witness or the educational supervisor, depending on which you've selected down at the bottom. And then any evidence that you have uploaded once you've saved will be located in the evidence list. So the evidence list is the next tab along. So all of the evidence uploaded is located in this area here. You can view lots of them, you can resend them. The resend one generally means that that piece of work has been sent to the expert witness or the evidence witness. So it's waiting for your witness to do something with it. If it's been sent a very long time ago, this piece of work was a year ago, you can resend it. And by clicking on the resend button, it opens up the piece of evidence. And here is the evidence witness information. If you needed to change the witness for any particular reason, perhaps Carrie's left, you would take out her name and add the name of a new person that you would like to receive a link to witness this particular piece of evidence. And then down at the bottom of the page, you would submit to evidence witness again. So that would then trigger it. If you want Carrie to receive it again, you can do the submit to evidence witness, and that will send a second email to Carrie and hopefully prompt her to do something with this particular piece of work. The next two tabs along are useful to know about, but not critical to any of your learning. This one is the unit status, and this will show you all of the evidence that's been uploaded and which performance standard each piece of evidence is recorded against. In the unit status area, it will also show you what the minimum requirement is. Now, for most of the performance standards for your centre, the minimum requirement is about 5 pieces of evidence for each performance standard, but that is only a guide, and that is not a criteria, if you like. So you're expected to produce several pieces of evidence, and 5 is expected to be about the average. You may submit 3 or 4, you may submit 7 or 8. Your educational supervisor will determine whether or not there is enough evidence against that particular performance standard. And it's only their decision which counts. So just because you've uploaded 5 doesn't mean that you've actually reached that performance criteria or performance standard. It has to be signed off by your educational supervisor. As each piece of evidence is uploaded by you, you're ticking off the performance standards that you think the piece of evidence has met. This does not progress your percentage completion at all. It's only when your educational supervisor comes along and looks at that piece of evidence and confirms it by also ticking those performance criteria that your percentage will go up. So in this example here, you may have submitted work against these first 3 performance standards, but unless your educational supervisor has marked those pieces of work and confirmed them, any ticks that you've added to those particular areas will not be shown in any of the reporting area. So if you're still at 0% and you've uploaded lots of evidence, have a chat with your educational supervisor just to make sure that everything is okay and that they are going to go ahead and mark your work, hopefully as soon as possible. So if we look at this one, for example, this has got 1 piece of evidence. We know that because it's 20% of the way through against our 5 recommended. So this is how it presents itself in a matrix. This is the piece of evidence, and if we wanted to look at the evidence, we could. It was a workbook, and it was workbook for rotation area, and it hit this particular performance standard, which is respond with willingness and flexibility, etc. So when your educational supervisor is happy that sufficient evidence has been uploaded against this performance standard, they would write a summative assessment and tick the box to confirm that you have demonstrated enough competency. You'll get a notification to let you know that that particular performance standard has been signed off, to let you know. The qualification status is just the end point. So when you've completed all the evidence for all of the performance standards and they've all been signed off, then your educational supervisor will sign off the performance standards for you, which hopefully will be in about next June time. So that's how you upload evidence. So you go to the log evidence page, you complete all the elements of that. You then either submit to your evidence witness or your educational supervisor. Any evidence is then recorded in the evidence list. The unit status page shows the matrix and whether or not any of those performance standards have been signed off. And then this one is for qualifications signed off. The other tab in this particular area is the Educational Supervisor and Trainee Meetings. You're expected to upload your meetings that you have with your educational supervisor in this particular area here. If you upload any, or if your educational supervisor upload any, you both get notifications to let each other know that a new log has been added. And the categories, if you use the drop-down section in this area here, those are the categories that you can upload a log in respect of. So it could be the 13-week review, an email, on-site meeting, progress meeting, telephone conversation. It could be any of those things that are uploaded by both you and your educational supervisor. You complete it in exactly the same way. This is a title field, and then you can add an activity date. You can forward date it or backdate it using the months, years, and dates. And then you write the activity detail in here, or again, in the same way that we did for the evidence, you can just type "see attached," and then again use this area down here to upload any document that's in respect of any of these things that you might have done with your educational supervisor. At the bottom of the page, you've got the save button. So long as you hit save, that particular log will then appear in this area here, and you can go into any of those logs at any time and edit them if you need to. So that's the uploading of evidence and the trainee meetings. The home area for you, there's a couple of areas which are important to you. One is the to-do tab. So if you treat this like your inbox for your email, for example, if there's anything in here, it needs actioning. It's separated by the different tables, which have got the blue line across. The first one that we've got here is evidence returned for action by the assessor. So this may be something that you've uploaded and sent to your educational supervisor, and they have returned it to you because there's more action to be done, or you need to clarify a particular point, or maybe look at a couple of other performance standards that you haven't considered for that particular piece of evidence. So if you do get a piece of work that's returned to you, you can just select the hyperlink on the right-hand side. It says rework, select that. That will open up the piece of evidence. And hopefully your educational supervisor in the comments area would have added some comments to give you some guidance as to why that particular piece of work needs reworking. If you remember when we were logging a piece of evidence, our third option on the blue arrows down at the bottom was save and continue later. That's when we were midway through uploading a piece of evidence and we hadn't quite finished, but we weren't ready to send it on to the next stage. So if we hit save and continue later, that's exactly what it looks like here. It's called unsubmitted evidence. And if we want to go and finish that piece of work, again, we select the hyperlink on the right-hand side. It opens up, takes us to that particular piece of evidence. We can complete the information and then use the blue buttons down at the bottom to decide which piece of work needs to go to whom. The information tab is very useful because this contains information about evidence that you've sent to your evidence witness. So if there's anything outstanding, it will be located in the info tab. And again, as I mentioned previously, if you need to prompt them into actioning that particular piece of evidence, then you can use the resend hyperlink at the end there and re-trigger it so it will send them an email. One thing I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar was about the NHS sites all having pretty strict IT protocols. Sometimes the evidence witness information falls into the same category. So if your evidence witness says, "Oh, I haven't received the email," then please do advise them to check their junk items. One other area that I just need to mention as well, if I open this piece of evidence here, in this area here, which is the email address. If you copy and paste an email address, sometimes your copying will pick up a blank space either before or at the end of the email. Now, you can't necessarily see that because you're just looking in there saying, "Oh yeah, knorth@sky.com, that's the correct email address." But what the computer is actually seeing is they're seeing the blank spaces before, the email address, and the blank spaces afterwards. And if that happens, that email will not reach the intended recipient. So if your expert witness says, I haven't received the email, the first port of call is check junk. The second port of call is for you to open up the piece of evidence and check to make sure there are no blank spaces. And to do that, if you just use your back arrow to take you back to the beginning of their email address, and then go to the beginning of the email address and do backspace again, and then save, that will, or resend to my evidence witness, that will make sure that the email will only go to knorth@sky.com and not blank space, knorth@sky.com. So there's just something to be careful about. It's always best to type the email address of the recipient in this area here rather than using cutting and pasting for that particular reason. The other tab that I want to look at here is My Progress Summary, and My Progress Summary will show you an overview of where you are against all of the performance standards. So it will show you how far through the qualification that you are to date. So we're 1% achieved, and then it will show you against all of the performance standard. Remember I said you needed approximately 5 pieces of evidence. There's 1 piece of evidence and therefore 20% against these particular performance standards. These are ones that have been agreed by your educational supervisor, and as I mentioned, you may already have uploaded evidence against these ones, but unless your educational supervisor has marked that piece of work, they won't necessarily have a percentage advancement in any of these areas here yet. There are lots of other areas in the e-portfolio that you can be aware of. They're not critical to your learning, so the bits that I've covered are the very important bits. How do I upload a piece of evidence? How do I upload a meeting? How do I send the piece of evidence via the expert witness or educational supervisor? Is there anything that I need to do? Is there anything that I need to be aware of? I keep on top of the evidence that I've sent to my expert witness to make sure they're actioning it in a reasonable time. And how am I getting on? That's on My Progress Summary. In the personal details area, this allows you to change your password if you need to at any particular point. And down at the bottom of the page, you have got the option to receive email reminders for evidence assessed in the last 7 days and evidence for units signed off in the last 7 days. These are set by default as that you receive the email once a week on a Monday, but if you want to change that at all, you can come to this area here so that you can elect to receive your email on a different day of the week, or if it's really important to you, you can elect to have a daily email, which is just a summary of anything that the educational supervisor has done. So there are other tabs that are in the portfolio which you can have a look at if you wish, but they're not critical to your learning. There is a reports area here which has just got a couple of reports for you. One is the evidence matrix. We looked at the evidence matrix on a performance standard by performance standard basis. This one will run a report which will show the evidence matrix for all of the performance standards. So every single piece of work that has been uploaded against any of the standards. And then the gap analysis will show you the performance standards that have not yet been hit that minimum number of times. So in the list, anything that had been hit 5 or more times will not show, but anything that has been hit 4 or less times will show, so that you'll be able to focus on which performance standards in particular you still need to upload evidence in respect of. So that's the end of the training session. I'm going to stop the recording and then ask if anybody has any questions. Please go ahead.